The Gospel we read this Sunday is taken from the 22nd chapter of St. Matthew. I'll read it. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they got together, and to disconcert him, one of them put a question. Master, which is the greatest commandment of the law? Jesus said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second resembles it. You must love your neighbour as yourself. On these two commandments hang the whole law and the prophets also. I've always found it a bit strange to say that to love is a commandment. You could command someone to love. Either you love or you don't. Or you can want to love or not refuse to love. It's strange to make it a commandment. But you know, Jesus was replying to people who thought in those terms. For the Pharisees and Sadducees, holiness meant keeping the law. You had all these rules, hundreds of them. The more you kept, the holier you were. Some worth more than others, 10 points for that, 3 points for that, but you can add it up. And Jesus says, you can keep all the laws and rules, but if it's without love, it's worth nothing. Later on, St. Paul, saying the same thing, said, I could give my body to be burnt, to be a martyr, but if I did it without love, it wouldn't do any good at all. Now when Jesus takes the phrase, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, he wasn't making something up that they hadn't heard of before. It's in the Old Testament, but it's called the Shema, and every morning and every evening a Jew would say that. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. Jesus had been taught that by his mother. It became part of you. Because the difficulty is, when you get a thing really part of you, if you do it without thinking, it might lose something of its meaning. It reminds me of one great saint, a man called Alphonsus Rodriguez. He became a Jesuit brother, and for more than 40 years he was doorkeeper at a big Jesuit college in Palma in Majorca. Same thing, imagine answering the door, some important people, some people begging, some people being a nuisance. And of course the bell rings at the worst time, always when you don't want it. So he trained himself, he said whenever the doorbell rang, he would say to himself, Jesus is calling me. He needed that to give it meaning. And so we need it to know what we mean by love. Now I might be wrong in this, but I can't remember any time that Jesus says love God, apart from this quotation from the Old Testament. Love your neighbour, love those who hate you. Yes, he did that again and again. Because if you love your neighbour, you're loving God. If you don't love your neighbour, don't kid yourself, you don't love God. So I'm trying to think, what do we mean by love? I asked one or two people before thinking of this homily, and they have an experience of it, but find it difficult to put into words. So I suggest this. Think of 3 people that you love. One in the family, one not in the family exactly, but someone you've known for some long time, part of your life. And a third one who you've met much more recently, who really cheers you up and the world becomes lighter when he or she appears. And you find there are different ways of loving. Some people I come to love because they really cheer me up. As soon as someone comes in the room, everything is different. I just love to hear them laugh. They understand my sense of humour. They fit in. And I was beginning to wonder, is that really loving? I love what they bring me, what they give me. Am I loving the person? Remind me of a poem I read ages ago by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now listen to this. If you love me, let it be naught except for love's sake only. Do not say, I love her for her smile, her look, her way of speaking gently, for a trick of thought that falls in well with mine. That's how we get to love people, isn't it? I love her smile. People would often say, I don't see what she sees in him, but she sees something which brings her alive. I knew one woman years ago, she was widowed in her mid-20s. And later on she was thinking of getting married again, and she said to me, when I get married, next time it's going to be for passion. I remember that. Or she married the most staid, almost I'd say boring person ever. And she's ecstatically happy with him and her family. Because he brought her something. But we need to pass beyond that, so I simply love the person, not just what they bring me and give me. And you find people do love like that. They love their children like that. In the year 1990, I was in a college in London, and 20 or 30 Eritrean children came. The war in Eritrea was vicious, and their parents put them on a plane. Immigration was not quite so tight then, but some parents had to sell their houses to put the children on the plane and said goodbye. They might never see them again. They loved their children to the extent that they would let them go. Remembered Sahai, we called her Sunny, lovely girl. She was 14 when she first came. Her mother and father met her again when she was 21. They loved their children. Not for what the children could give them. So we need to pass from that first loving, which never stops, I hope, in the way that I really love to see people. I miss them when they're away, what they bring to me. But more than that, I love them for themselves. I'll give you a parable. Well, at least I'll start it. You have to finish it. Once upon a time, there was an emperor, and he had a beautiful daughter called Esmeralda. Well, some people thought she was beautiful. One man really did think she was beautiful. He loved her. But he was a commoner. Now, I don't know about royalty now, but royals in the old days, you had to be married and love someone who was royal. But she fell in love with a commoner. And the emperor said, no, that won't do. For that, he must die. But I'll give him a chance. So he put him in an arena, and in this arena there were two doors. Behind one was a lion, death. If he chose that, he would die, for love of Esmeralda. If he chose the other door, there's a beautiful, lovely lady, and he would have to marry her and go away and forget the princess. And in case you think he couldn't forget her, Merlin the wizard put a spell on him. He wouldn't reject the princess, he just wouldn't recognize her. He would just walk off and never see her again. She would say goodbye. Well, all the people around the top of the arena looking down and wondering which door he would choose, because he didn't know which was which. But the princess did know. And she looked down and saw him there, wanting to die. For her, with her name on his lips as the last thing he would say, his love would be eternal. And so she sent a message down telling him which door to choose. Okay, which door did she send? Which door did she suggest? If she wants to hang on to his love, as he did, then she would tell him to choose the door which spelt death, goodbye. But if she's just thinking of him and his happiness, she would suggest a way in which he would forget her completely and go away. Love in giving rather than receiving. That's why we need that prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, grant that I may seek not so much to be consoled as to console, not so much to be understood as to understand. May I not seek to be loved, but to love. I want them both. But that my loving and giving dominate, and not my receiving what I get from the person who loves me. That I may seek to respect someone else rather than look for somebody's respect. We pass from one to the other. We never lose the first one of the joy I get from the company of others. But what will dominate is when I think of the person and I love that person in himself. And our love grows in that way. And it grows not only in that deeper way, but when you learn to love in your family and your close friends, that love dominates and spreads, and you find you love other people more and more. Not long ago, I met a woman called Mary Alice, a most lovely person. She was a real mother figure. She loved children and children loved her. And the tragedy of her life was that she and her husband could not have children. When he was in his 40s, he was killed in a terrible accident, and it took her a long time to get over that. But when she did, they then thought, I will give my love to children who need it, and decided to go to South Africa to mother and look after the orphans whose parents had died from AIDS. A lovely idea. So she went into London. She lived in England. She went into London and found an agency who did this work and would send her out. But she said to me afterwards, they were lovely people, but so disorganized. They were sending out the wrong people to the wrong places. They were wasting money, which they didn't intend to waste. And in the end, she decided she would help these orphans by remaining in an office in London and sending other people out. She would never have the feeling of holding those children in her arms. She loved those children. She gave her life, or is giving her life for them. Pray that we will have such a love. And I pray for you that the Lord will grant that you may not seek so much to be consoled as to console, not so much to be understood as to understand, not so much to be loved as to love with all your heart. Amen. God bless you.